Hey guys, tonight we drift into a story soaked in sunlight, grapes, and a headache so monumental it could fell Olympus itself. You open your eyes to a blurry world of broken amphorae, sticky puddles of ancient wine, and the muffled groaning of what might be a satyr under a table. The air smells like regret and fermented fruit. Even before your brain catches up, your body knows. Dionysus has overdone it again. You probably won't survive this, at least not without divine intervention. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where you're all tuning in from. It makes these midnight myths feel like a global campfire. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You awaken in a place that's half dream, half archaeological ruin. The ground beneath you is the cracked marble floor of a temple dedicated to yourself. Though right now, the stone feels less like a throne room and more like a cold compress for your forehead. You sit up, wincing as sunlight slices through the air. It feels personal, as if Apollo himself angled the rays just to spite you. Around you lie the remnants of what last night must have been. Shattered cups, overturned altars, a few followers still sprawled out like fallen soldiers of celebration. Someone's harp string twangs weakly in the breeze, sounding like an apology. You clutch your head and think, so this is what mortality feels like. The irony, of course, is divine. You're the god of wine, revelry, ecstasy, of losing control. Yet here you are, the morning after, trapped in the same mortal misery you once mocked them for. Somewhere, Zeus is laughing into his thundercloud. The first step to recovery is denial. You tell yourself it's not a hangover, it's simply post-divine recalibration. You've transcended too much joy, that's all. But the pounding in your temples suggests otherwise. It's the kind of pain that has rhythm, like an angry drumline echoing through the skull. You'd swear there's a tiny Athenian army marching behind your eyes. You drag yourself upright, your toga stained and one sandal missing. The temple smells of stale honey and crushed grapes. As you stagger outside, the sunlight burns like judgment. Birds scatter in a burst of wings as you emerge, muttering curses that would make a sailor blush. And there it is, your vineyard. Once the pride of Nysa, now a battlefield of fallen fruit. Rows of grapevines sway in the gentle wind, their leaves whispering like gossip. Each grape seems to mock you, round, plump, smug little spheres of your own undoing. You can still taste them on your tongue, the sweetness that lured you to excess. You reach out and pluck one. It squishes in your hand, sticky juice running between your fingers. You did this to me, you mutter to the grape, as though it could answer. Maybe it does. The wind picks up, carrying the faint scent of fermentation and something else, memory, perhaps. In the haze of your hangover, you remember last night's celebration. Mortals had gathered from across the Aegean, singing praises, pouring wine, dancing until dawn. You, of course, led the charge. There had been laughter, music, maybe even a small miracle or two. Someone swore they saw the moon double in the sky. But that might have just been the wine talking. Now the music is gone, replaced by the faint hum of cicadas. You stumble toward the vineyard's edge where the earth dips into a stream. The water sparkles, infuriatingly bright. You kneel, cupping it in your hands. It's cold, clear, merciless. You drink deeply, and instantly regret it. The shock sends a jolt through your skull so sharp you almost see stars. Hydration, humanity's first hangover cure, and apparently even the gods can't improve upon it. Still, you persist. Another handful, another grimace. Somewhere deep down, a flicker of clarity begins to return. This is when the true irony dawns on you. For all your wisdom, your temples, your cults, you've never once tried to undo the very curse you unleashed. You gave mortals the joy of wine, but left them the suffering of the morning after. Perhaps that's balance. Or perhaps you think it's laziness. As you sit beside the stream watching reflections ripple, a strange thought occurs. Maybe it's time to fix this. Maybe it's time for Dionysus to invent something new. Not a new vintage, not another festival, but a cure. A way to sip without suffering. You laugh weakly at the thought. A hangover cure? That would make you the most beloved god in Greece, perhaps even give you an edge over Apollo. You imagine priests pouring libations of gratitude not just before drinking, but after. Altars stocked with herbs and honey instead of apologies. Then again, this might be the dehydration talking. Still, curiosity has a way of surviving even the worst hangover. You pull yourself up, brushing dust from your robes. The vineyard stretches endlessly before you, an empire of grapes glistening in the sun. Somewhere in there, you feel it. A secret waiting to be uncovered. A way to turn pain back into pleasure. As you begin walking, your steps slow, deliberate. Each vine you pass whispers of your past victories. You remember teaching mortals how to ferment, how to forget, how to feel joy without reason. You remember festivals that lasted for weeks, rivers of red wine flowing through villages. You remember laughter so loud it drowned out wars. But now, the question burns brighter than your headache. Can the same hand that birthed intoxication create its antidote? The ancient world was already full of crude attempts at hangover cures. Egyptians mixed ground lotus and honey. Persians swore by pickled cabbage juice. Somewhere, a Babylonian priest probably tried sacrificing a goat to feel better. Historians still argue whether any of these remedies actually worked, or if humanity has just been pretending for millennia. You, however, have the advantage of divine chemistry. You can sense the pulse within the vine, the fermentation process like a heartbeat beneath your fingertips. Somewhere in that rhythm lies the answer. You just need to listen closely enough. You pluck another grape, examining its skin. Tiny droplets cling to it, almost shimmering in the light. You pop it into your mouth, not for pleasure this time, but for study. The sweetness is layered, complex. There's something there, something beyond sugar. Maybe balance. Maybe wisdom. You make a mental note to ask Hephaestus about distillation later. The smith god knows more about liquids and pressure than anyone. But for now, the mission is simple. Understand why the cure doesn't already exist. Why has no mortal or god yet solved the puzzle? Because perhaps the hangover isn't a punishment, it's a reminder. That's the thought that sneaks in as you walk deeper into the vineyard. A reminder that even joy has limits, that excess comes with echoes. It's poetic, really. Too poetic for this level of pain. You shake your head, trying to dispel the philosophy. You're not here to moralize, you're here to survive. As the day wears on, you find shade beneath an olive tree. The bark is cool, the air heavy with bees, and the hum of life. You close your eyes just for a moment, and there, in the drifting haze between waking and sleep, a plan begins to take shape. You'll find the ingredients yourself. You'll test them on your divine constitution first, then maybe, if it doesn't kill you, share them with mortals. You'll turn repentance into ritual. You smile faintly. The god of wine creating the cure for wine. It's beautifully hypocritical. Somewhere behind you, a satyr sneezes awake, mutters something about never drinking again, and immediately reaches for the nearest flask. You sigh. Maybe curing hangovers will be easier than curing stupidity. The sun tilts westward. The world warms to gold. Your headache fades, not gone, but dulled by determination. You stand once more, looking out at your vineyard kingdom. Tomorrow, you decide, you'll begin the search in earnest. But tonight, you'll rest. Even gods need to pace themselves. Still, as you lie beneath the olive branches, you can't help whispering to the wind. Tomorrow, I invent the hangover cure. The wind carries your promise away, over the hills, across the sea, toward whatever destiny waits for you in the next sunrise. And far away, perhaps in Olympus, a thundercloud chuckles softly. You wake before dawn, though wake might be generous. More like you drag your awareness up from a swamp of half-dreams and sticky regret. The horizon bleeds lavender and bronze as the sun limps over the hills, still gentle enough not to stab your eyes. You stand at the edge of your vineyard, barefoot, robe wrinkled, your head still pulsing in a dull rhythm that could almost be music if it weren't lodged behind your temples. The air is heavy with dew and the sweet smell of fermenting fruit. Grapes cling to the vines like guilty children avoiding your gaze. Each one feels like a tiny confession. You stretch, groaning, your spine clicking like an old amphora lid. Around you, the world stirs. A satyr stumbling through leaves, a nymph washing her hair in the stream, and the faint rustle of someone, or something, lurking among the vines. That something turns out to be a mortal. You squint, shielding your eyes. He's dressed in coarse linen, dirt-smudged, hair tied back with a strip of vine fiber. He's humming softly as he plucks grapes, placing them into a basket slung over one shoulder. A thief. Brave, stupid, or both. You watch him for a while. He doesn't notice you. Mortals rarely look for gods before breakfast. His movements are careful, almost reverent, not the twitchy haste of a thief. You tilt your head, curious despite yourself. Finally, you step forward. The grass bends under your feet without a sound, the air cooling slightly as your presence spreads. You know, you say, voice smooth as aged wine, those belong to me. He freezes, the basket slipping from his shoulder. Grapes scatter like spilled secrets. He turns slowly, eyes wide. Lord Dionysus, he stammers, dropping to his knees. I meant no, I was only. Stealing breakfast? You arch a brow. Relax, I'm not Zeus. I don't hurl lightning before coffee. He blinks. You drink coffee? You grin faintly. Not yet, but give mortals a century or two. They'll invent something that tastes like regret and keeps poets awake. The mortal hesitates, then laughs nervously. Forgive me, my lord. I'm called Philo. I tend the vineyards of King Orestes. I meant no insult. Philo, the name rolls easily off the tongue. Philo, you echo. You have the look of a man who knows his plants. I do, my lord, he says quickly. Herbs, roots, infusions, I study how the earth heals what it harms. You squint, intrigued. So you claim the earth heals, even from the gifts I gave it? Philo swallows. Even from wine, perhaps, if one learns which plants forgive your blessings. That earns a laugh from you, low and warm, though a hint of admiration lingers beneath. You speak boldly for someone trembling like a leaf. I tremble, Philo says, because I'm honored, not afraid. You like him already. Mortals rarely manage honesty under divine pressure. Tell me something, Philo. Ever wake up after a feast and feel as though your skull's been replaced by a bronze drum? He winces. Often, my lord. And have you ever cured it? He hesitates, eyes darting to the basket at his feet. Once, perhaps twice, by accident, a mixture of honey, mint, and willow bark. It dulled the pain, though it made my tongue go numb. You tilt your head. Willow bark. You've heard of that. Mortals chew it for pain, the way wolves gnaw on bones. The priests of Delphi once whispered that Apollo favored it, calling it sacred. Historians still argue whether they meant spiritually sacred or medically effective. Show me, you say. Philo blinks. My lord, show me your cure. He stares as though you've asked him to outdrink Poseidon. I have the herbs at my hut. It's not far. Then lead on, you say, and don't worry, I walk slowly when hungover. The path winds through olive groves and fig trees, the soil soft beneath your feet. As you go, Philo chatters nervously about botany, about how roots speak to the moon and how dew carries the whispers of stars. You half listen, half daydream, your mind floating between fatigue and fascination. There's something soothing about the mortal's earnestness. You'd forgotten how charming ignorance can be when paired with sincerity. When you reach his hut, it's exactly what you expect. Humble, crooked, smelling faintly of herbs and goat. Inside, dried plants hang from the rafters like strange chandeliers. Clay jars line the walls, each labeled in neat hand: thyme, fennel, poppy, mint. A small fire smolders in the hearth. Philo bustles about, mixing ingredients into a clay cup. You watch him, arms crossed, the faintest smile tugging at your lips. There's something almost ritualistic about the way he moves, measured, focused, reverent. You can't help but admire it. Finally, he holds up the cup. "Drink this, my lord," he says, slowly. "It may taste unpleasant." You take it, sniff, recoil slightly. It smells like a compost heap having an existential crisis. Still, you're nothing if not brave. "If I die," you mutter, "tell the muses I went down experimenting." The first sip hits your tongue like damp bark and old mint. The second sip burns a little. By the third, your throat feels warm, your pulse steadying. The pain in your temples fades to a distant throb. You blink. The world sharpens at the edges. "Well," you say, surprised, "either that worked, or I'm hallucinating sobriety." Philo watches nervously. "Do you feel better, my lord?" You swirl the dregs in the cup. "Better, but not whole. It's like using perfume on a corpse, pleasant, but it doesn't solve the problem." Philo nods thoughtfully. "Then perhaps it's not a single cure," he says, "but a sequence. A balance of opposites." You grin. "Balance. You mortals and your balance. I prefer excess. It's more exciting." "Excess," he says softly, "is only thrilling until it hurts." You pause. "That hits deeper than expected." "You're wiser than you look, Philo." He shrugs. "That's what my wife said before she left me for a blacksmith." You chuckle. "Smart woman." You spend the rest of the morning experimenting, adding honey for sweetness, mint for clarity, crushed grapes for irony. The concoction evolves from mud-brown sludge to something almost golden. You sip, adjust, sip again. A strange calm settles over you, not the hollow calm of sobriety, but the grounded stillness of control. There's something new in this, something promising. Outside, the satyrs have found you. They gather around the hut, whispering and snickering. One bold creature peeks in. "Lord Dionysus," he says, "are you making soup?" You glare. "It's medicine." The satyr grins. "Same thing, isn't it?" You toss him a glance sharp enough to silence him. "Bring water from the stream, and grapes, fresh ones." They scatter, giggling. You sigh. "Sometimes I wonder why I keep them around." Philo smiles. "Because they remind you of yourself, perhaps?" "Blasphemy," you say lightly, "but accurate." By noon, the new mixture is ready. You and Philo stand over it like conspirators. The liquid glows faintly, sunlight catching on tiny bubbles. You can smell the harmony, herb, fruit, and faint bitterness. "This," you whisper, "might actually work." You drink. The warmth spreads instantly, but this time it's different. Cleaner, lighter, as though your veins are being rinsed. The fog in your mind clears completely. Even your vision seems sharper. "By Olympus," you breathe. "Philo, you've done it." Philo bows low. "I only followed your guidance, my lord." You laugh softly. "Don't flatter me. I've done nothing but complain and taste things." Still, the truth settles like sunlight in your chest. You've stumbled on something real, a way to turn the aftermath of joy into renewal. Not an antidote to pleasure, but its companion. "Philo," you say, "how many mortals know this recipe?" "None, my lord, it's yours to claim." You smile slowly. "Then the world will soon owe me two debts, one for the hangover and one for its cure." Outside, a satyr sneezes again. You sigh. "First, though, I should probably test it on someone less divine." Philo pales. "You mean?" "Yes," you say. "The satyrs." The afternoon unfolds in chaos. Satyrs line up eagerly, suspiciously eager to drink anything you label divine. The first gulps the potion and promptly sneezes out a cloud of mint vapor. The second hiccups for 5 minutes straight, then bursts into song. The third merely belches and declares himself reborn. It's progress. Chaotic, messy progress, but progress nonetheless. By sunset, your hangover is gone. Not masked, not numbed, gone. Your body hums with vitality, your mind sharp, your spirit balanced. You look out over the vineyard again, golden in the fading light, and feel something close to pride. For the first time, you've created joy that doesn't demand suffering in return. The satyrs dance in the distance. Philo hums as he stirs another batch, and you, god of ecstasy, feel strangely serene. You raise your cup to the horizon. To balance, you murmur, and to whoever wakes up tomorrow needing this. The breeze carries the scent of mint and wine through the valley. Somewhere, Apollo probably feels the shift in the air and scowls. Tomorrow, you'll have to deal with him. But tonight, the vineyard of regret has finally forgiven you. You wake the next morning to a chorus of snoring, giggling, and the occasional goat bleat. The satyrs have turned your vineyard into a battlefield again. Empty jugs, half-eaten figs, and one unconscious flute player hanging upside down from a branch. You sigh. Even with a hangover cure, it seems chaos still finds you before breakfast. The potion worked. You can feel it in your bones. No fog, no nausea, no pounding in your skull. The divine machinery inside you hums smoothly again. You stretch, smiling to yourself. Dionysus, god of wine and recovery. The title has a nice ring to it. But as you survey the wreckage, you realize your followers haven't yet caught up to your revelation. Satyrs never learn moderation. In fact, moderation sounds to them like a disease. You clap your hands, the sound echoing across the vineyard like a small thunderclap. Up, my little disasters, you call. We've work to do. They groan in unison. One mumbles, if this is about cleaning, I'd rather be smited. Relax, you say, grinning. We're testing something new. The cure. Again. That wakes them. Dozens of heads pop up from under bushes, behind barrels, and even out of a grape press. The cure? A satyr squeaks. You mean more wine? Better than wine, you reply. Wine's smarter cousin. They stare blankly. You sigh. Fine. Think of it as a potion that lets you drink forever without dying inside afterward. That earns a cheer so loud it startles the crows from the trees. Philo emerges from the hut, dark circles under his eyes but a proud smile on his face. He's been up since dawn, refining the recipe, testing proportions, muttering to himself about chemical harmonies and digestive pH. You like this mortal's curiosity. It mirrors your own, only less shiny. He hands you a cup of the new mixture. It's smoother now, the color of sunrise, and it smells faintly of mint and honey. You take a sip, clean, balanced, alive. Perfect, you murmur, almost holy. Philo beams. I adjusted the willow bark and added a touch of fennel. It seems to soothe the stomach. Historians still argue whether fennel belongs in anything, you say wryly, but I'll allow it. The satyrs meanwhile grow restless. They crowd around, hooves clacking, tails flicking. You motion for silence. Listen closely, my fuzzy children, you begin. Last night you indulged beyond mortal limits. Today, you'll test the elixir that saves us from the consequences of joy. Blank stares. You sigh. It's a hangover cure. Why didn't you just say that? One calls. Because I'm a god, you reply. We use dramatic phrasing. You line them up and start distributing cups. Each satyr drinks, reacts differently. Some gasp, others blink in confusion. One clutches his stomach, then bursts out laughing. Another burps and declares himself enlightened. But something unexpected happens. The laughter shifts. It's softer, calmer. No manic energy, no wild frenzy, just contentment. The air itself feels lighter. You watch, fascinated. Look at them, you whisper to Philo. They're peaceful. He nods. The potion balances dopamine and acetylcholine, I suspect. Your divinity amplifies the effect. You blink. You're speaking in tongues, mortal. He grins. It means they're happy but not crazy. That, you realize, is revolutionary. You've spent centuries teaching mortals to lose themselves. But this teaches them to find themselves again afterward. A young satyr plucks his flute and begins to play a slow tune. Others join in, swaying gently. The vineyard transforms, not into a riot, but a meditation. For the first time, your followers dance without destruction. You feel something stir in your chest. Pride? Maybe. Or maybe the faint ache of change. The music drifts over the hills, down into nearby villages. Farmers pause in their fields, hearing the melody. Shepherds glance up, wondering if the gods are at it again. And perhaps they are. By midday, word has spread. Mortals begin arriving at your vineyard. Peasants, merchants, even a few soldiers from Thebes, drawn by rumor. They've heard whispers. Dionysus has cured the hangover. They approach nervously, bearing offerings, bread, honey, jugs of unfermented grape juice. The irony doesn't escape you. You accept each with a gracious nod. Then, as the crowd swells, you notice one figure at the edge, taller, radiant, wearing a crown of laurel leaves. The air glows faintly around him. Apollo, your half-brother, god of light, reason, and smugness. He strides through the crowd, golden hair shining like a warning. Brother, he calls, voice smooth and infuriatingly clear. I heard rumors that you've discovered restraint. You smile thinly. Not restraint, dear Apollo. Balance. A concept you might appreciate if you ever stop staring at yourself long enough. Laughter ripples through the mortals. Apollo's jaw tightens. I came, he says, to warn you. Tampering with mortal chemistry invites chaos. You of all gods should know that. Chaos built civilization, you reply. You built boredom. Philo looks between you nervously, sensing divine tension. Perhaps, he suggests, we could test the potion scientifically? Apollo arches a perfect eyebrow. Science? You've been spending too much time with mortals. Better mortals than muses, you shoot back. At least they don't run when I start dancing. The crowd gasps softly. Even the satyrs pause their flutes. You grin, loving every second of it. Tell me, brother, you continue. What's your cure for hangovers? Light therapy? Poetry recitals? Apollo smirks. Sunlight, hydration, moderation. The crowd groans audibly. You chuckle. Moderation, you say, is what mortals promise and never keep. My cure meets them where they are, on the floor, clutching their heads, begging for mercy. A faint shimmer crosses Apollo's expression, somewhere between amusement and irritation. Historians will argue, he says evenly, which of us truly served mankind. Let them argue, you say. I'll be too busy celebrating. For a moment, the two of you simply stand there, sun and wine, order and chaos, light and shade. The air between you vibrates with old rivalry. Then, unexpectedly, Apollo smiles. Fine, he says. Let's test your invention. You blink. What? Give me your potion, he says. Let the god of medicine decide. You hand him a cup, wary. He examines it, sniffing like a critic at a bad tavern. Then, without ceremony, he drinks. The reaction is subtle at first. His pupils widen slightly. The tension in his shoulders eases. His breath deepens. Then, impossibly, he laughs, a small, genuine laugh. Well, he admits, I feel good. You grin. See, even the sun can get a little tipsy on balance. The crowd cheers. Even Apollo chuckles, shaking his head. You may have created something remarkable, brother. Dangerous, but remarkable. Everything worth doing is, you reply. He raises his cup in salute. Then may the world enjoy your gift responsibly. Responsibly? You echo. Now you're asking too much. Apollo's laughter rings like chimes as he fades into light. The mortals scatter, whispering excitedly. Philo looks dazed but elated. You sink onto a barrel, exhaling. That went better than expected. Philo nods. You impressed Apollo himself. I know, you say. I hate it. Evening falls. The satyrs hum lullabies to themselves, drunk on serenity rather than spirits. The vineyard glows under moonlight, the vines shimmering silver. You watch them, wondering what this new peace will bring. The god of wine, witnessing moderation, it feels almost sacrilegious. Yet somehow... Right. Still, you sense a storm brewing. Balance has enemies, and gods, especially jealous ones, rarely let innovation go unpunished. You sip the potion one last time, tasting the calm before the chaos. Tomorrow, you murmur, we celebrate properly, because even a god who's cured the hangover still loves a good party. You leave the satyrs behind, their laughter echoing like hiccups from a previous life, and wander toward a thin ribbon of smoke curling up from the valley. You're still not entirely sober. Your steps have the confidence of a drunk philosopher making bad life choices. But you're determined. Somewhere out there, a mortal claims to have crafted a hangover cure. A mortal? The audacity almost sobers you on its own. The valley smells of rosemary, thyme, and the faint metallic tang of crushed copper. You follow the scent until you reach a small hut built into the hillside. There, crouched over a bubbling pot, is a man who looks like he's been awake since the invention of insomnia. His name, he says, is Philo, which feels appropriate for someone who probably argues with plants. God of wine, he mutters without looking up. You look like something the satyrs dragged in. You smirk. I've been worse. Once I woke up in Crete married to 3 goats and an amphora. He doesn't even blink. You're lucky. Goats are loyal. Philo's cauldron spits purple steam. He claims it's the vapor of the sobering herb, a blend of mint, honey, and a rare root that grows only where someone once wept into the soil after drinking too much. He calls it a divine hangover antidote, though he admits he's never tested it on an actual god. You eye the mixture skeptically. What's in it? He shrugs. Regret. Mostly regret. You watch him grind herbs with the seriousness of a temple scribe. A bronze pestle beats rhythmically against the mortar. The sound reminds you of the pounding in your skull. The air grows thick with sage and superstition. Philo explains that ancient healers believed hangovers weren't punishment, but imbalance. Your inner fire fighting your inner water. The cure, therefore, must reconcile the two without snuffing either out. Historians still argue whether early Greek medicine was more spiritual than chemical. But here, kneeling in a hut reeking of thyme and damp clay, you can almost feel the logic behind it. Every smell, every taste, every hum of the earth feels like part of an elaborate apology ritual for the body. Philo pours a small bowl of the concoction. It's greenish, opaque, and smoking faintly, like jealousy served hot. He slides it across the table. Drink, and you'll know. You hesitate. The last time a mortal offered you a drink, it was laced with snake venom and optimism. Still, curiosity is your oldest addiction. You lift the bowl and sip. At first, it tastes like mint trying to seduce a lemon. Then the bitterness hits, sharp, medicinal, and far too honest. You grimace. This tastes like a bad decision confessing its sins. Philo grins. Good, that means it's working. Within moments, your head starts to buzz. Not painfully, but with strange clarity. Colors sharpen. The hut's walls seem to breathe with you. The smoke turns into shapes. Faces, vines, laughter. You blink and see satyrs dancing across the steam, nymphs wringing grapes into constellations. A goat tells you to hydrate. You are hallucinating, but gently. It's almost pleasant. Philo observes you like a scholar watching lightning in a jar. You're seeing what mortals can't, he murmurs. That's the real medicine, the body remembering how to forgive itself. You want to argue, but your tongue feels too philosophical to move. The world shifts again. Now you're standing in a field of golden vines under a sun that hums like a lyre. You realize the hangover haze is lifting, not because of the herbs, but because your divine body is recalibrating. The cure might be less about chemistry, more about rhythm, restoring the music between pulse and breath. You wake hours later on Philo's floor, wrapped in a rough wool blanket that smells faintly of sheep and redemption. Outside, dawn stains the sky pale pink. The pounding in your skull is gone. The world feels crisp, absurdly alive. You step out of the hut, stretching. Birds are gossiping. The wind tastes like clean slate. Philo hands you a small clay vial. Distilled version, he says. Just a few drops after indulgence. But be warned. It works best when the drinker promises moderation. You laugh so hard you nearly spill it. You expect moderation from me? He sighs. I expect hope. Moderation would be a miracle. You tuck the vial into your robe and glance toward the horizon. Somewhere, Apollo's sun is climbing higher, smug as usual. You have a feeling he'll want to debate this new discovery. You roll your shoulders, preparing for divine argument. Before leaving, you look back at Philo's hut, his little smoky laboratory of mercy. You feel oddly grateful. Not just for the cure, but for the reminder that mortals, for all their fragility, still dare to tinker with the gods' hangovers. As you walk, the world feels lighter, though you still stumble once on a root shaped exactly like your bad habits. You mutter a curse, then laugh at yourself. Somewhere behind you, Philo's laughter joins yours. Soft, knowing, mortal. The path from Philo's hut leads you into the kind of sunrise that looks too delicate for the world's noise. The hills stretch like lazy waves, dotted with poppies half awake and bees already gossiping about nectar. You walk slower than usual, not out of exhaustion, but out of awe at being upright. No pounding temples, no sour taste of regret, just a strange clarity, as if your mind's wine barrel has finally been rinsed clean. Of course, clarity doesn't last long when you're Dionysus. Curiosity grows in you like ivy. It clings, twists, and eventually strangles reason. You can't help but think, what if this cure could work for everyone? Not just for gods with titanium livers, but for mortals who wake with their tongues glued to the roof of their mouths, swearing they'll never drink again. You turn Philo's little clay vial in your hand. It feels fragile, ridiculously mortal, but it hums with quiet potential. A drop of regret and a pinch of forgiveness, you murmur. What could go wrong? The answer, as it turns out, is everything. You set up your makeshift testing ground in an abandoned olive grove. The trees, ancient and stoic, watch silently as you summon a few loyal satyrs, your usual test subjects when curiosity meets recklessness. They appear in a blur of laughter and bad ideas, carrying wineskins and a flute that sounds like it was made from regret. Experiment time, you declare. Drink as much as you can, then drink this. You hold up the vial like a prophet brandishing salvation. They cheer, obviously. Hours later, the grove is a battlefield of bliss. The satyrs have invented new ways to dance horizontally. A goat is reciting poetry to an amphora, and you've written a half-decent hymn to sobriety on a fig leaf. You decide it's time. You pour drops of Philo's potion into a bowl and distribute it. The satyrs gulp it down with heroic faith. For a moment, silence. A sacred, ominous silence. Then the chaos begins. The first satyr's eyes widen. My head feels, he begins, then burps a small puff of purple smoke. Another giggles uncontrollably. A third declares that the trees are whispering compliments. You raise an eyebrow. That's new. Within minutes, half the grove is hallucinating. The other half has fallen into the kind of peaceful sleep you only see in temple frescoes. You crouch beside one, checking his pulse. Not that you're a doctor, but divine concern has a good bedside manner. He's fine, just dreaming about grapes that sing lullabies. So technically, it works. Sort of. You take a cautious sip yourself. The taste is still vile, minty remorse with undertones of dirt, but the effect is immediate. Your body buzzes, your vision sharpens, and your mind clears as if scrubbed by lightning. But then the colors shift again, warping around you like melted glass. You blink, and the world tilts sideways. You are no longer in the olive grove. Instead, you're floating above it, weightless, watching yourself and the satyrs as though you're observing from the eye of a wine jug. The air hums with rhythm, heartbeat, wind, laughter, all stitched into one divine pulse. It's not terrifying. It's revelatory. You see it now, the link between intoxication and insight. Maybe hangovers weren't punishments. They were the body's desperate attempt to reconcile the divine and the human. The cure isn't about removing pain, it's about harmonizing it. A reminder that too much joy unbalanced becomes suffering. But your revelation is interrupted by a goat wearing your crown. You're floating again, boss. It bleats. You blink, and gravity remembers you exist. You crash down into the grass, laughing hard enough to scare away philosophy. When you finally sober from both the brew and the epiphany, the satyrs are asleep. The grove glows with dawn's aftertaste. And your mind feels oddly improved. You can sense the faint tickle of chemistry behind the magic, the herbs triggering something in your divine bloodstream. You can almost imagine, centuries later, humans in white coats isolating the compound, naming it, bottling it, and pretending they discovered it first. Historians still argue whether ancient herbalists like Philo understood chemistry or just stumbled into it by luck. You suspect both. Most miracles begin as accidents anyway. You gather the sleeping satyrs, drape them under olive branches, and decide the test was a success, mostly because nobody exploded. When you return to Philo's hut to share your results, he's asleep by the fire, surrounded by scrolls scrawled with recipes. On one, you see a formula combining honey, vinegar, and crushed willow bark. You recognize the bark's bitter scent. It's the same compound that, millennia later, mortals will refine into salicylic acid, better known as aspirin. You grin. You clever mortal. You leave him sleeping, the firelight flickering across his tired face. Outside, the sun burns high, and you feel something almost unfamiliar. Humility. Maybe mortals deserve more credit than you've given them. Maybe gods and men aren't so different when it comes to chasing relief from their own excesses. You tuck the vial safely away and start walking north, toward Delphi. You can already feel Apollo's smug light warming the air. He'll have opinions, as always. You roll your eyes, muttering, "Here comes the celestial health inspector." Still, you're oddly eager for the debate. After all, if anyone can help refine a divine hangover cure, it might be the god who never gets drunk but always acts like he's above everyone who does. You sigh, shoulders relaxed, spirit oddly clear. For once, you're not weighed down by the aftermath of pleasure. The world hums around you, alive, forgiving, quietly amused. And deep down, you can't shake the feeling that you've stumbled on something that could outlive even you. By the time you reach Delphi, your sandals are dusty, your patience thinner than your last mortal disguise, and your head buzzing, not from wine this time, but from anticipation. The city hums with worshippers, incense, and the low murmur of prophecy. Every few steps, someone bows without realizing who you are. You've disguised yourself as an ordinary traveler with a very fancy robe and terrible hair. The temple gleams ahead, all white marble and self-importance. The air smells of laurel leaves and superiority. Somewhere inside, your half-brother Apollo lounges on a marble throne, probably polishing his lyre and his ego at the same time. You can already hear him humming, because of course he hums. You stride in. The priestesses gasp as the shadows ripple around you. "No need for ceremony," you say, "just here to have a word with the sun." And there he is. Apollo, radiant as always, all golden curls and smug serenity. He looks like the inside of a hymn. "Brother," he says with that maddening calm, "you look less decayed than usual." You smile. Hangover free. "Wouldn't believe it if I hadn't lived through it." He raises an eyebrow. Impossible. Divine intoxication is sacred chaos. You can't cure what's holy. Watch me, you reply, pulling out Philo's little vial. Apollo eyes it with the suspicion of someone who's seen you set temples on fire before. You let mortals experiment on you again? Experiment with me, you correct. And it worked. A mortal named Philo, brilliant, probably underpaid, found an herb that resets the balance. You drink it, your body forgives you. He laughs, that melodic, infuriating laugh. Forgives you? You speak of wine as though it commits crimes. Tell that to the mortals praying to your temple toilets, you mutter. Apollo steps closer, the air around him growing warmer. Hangovers are lessons. Without consequence, joy becomes meaningless. Mortals must suffer the aftermath. It teaches restraint. You roll your eyes. You'd turn life into a lecture if you could. He tilts his head, smirking. And you'd turn lectures into taverns. For a moment, silence. Then you both burst out laughing, the sound echoing through marble halls like the world's first duet of chaos and order. But the debate doesn't die. You both pace like philosophers trapped in a divine symposium. Think about it, you argue. Mortals create beauty through indulgence, music, art, even worship. But the hangover kills inspiration before it can ferment. If they could recover faster, imagine what they'd make. Apollo leans against a column. Or imagine how quickly they destroy themselves. Without pain, there is no boundary. Historians still argue whether you ever had fun, you say dryly. He smirks. I play the lyre. You groan. Playing the lyre is not fun, it's foreplay for vanity. For a heartbeat, divine tension crackles between you, sunlight versus shadow, discipline versus ecstasy. The universe holds its breath, half expecting thunder. But instead, Apollo sighs, softening. Let's say you're right, he murmurs. Let's say your cure truly works. Then it's not medicine, it's mercy. Do you trust mortals with mercy? The question lands heavier than expected. You think of Philo, asleep by his fire, of the satyrs dreaming under olive trees, of countless mortals who toast to joy and wake to regret. You want to say yes, but you've watched too many feasts end in ruin. Maybe not all of them, you admit, but some deserve it. The ones who drink for celebration, not escape. The ones who want to live, not forget. Apollo studies you, eyes bright as dawn. You sound almost wise. Don't ruin my reputation, you mutter. He smiles faintly and gestures toward the temple's rear courtyard. Come. If your cure is as miraculous as you claim, prove it. Outside, a dozen attendants are preparing for the midday rituals. They bow as you approach, though Apollo waves off their reverence. We need volunteers, he announces, preferably those with strong stomachs and poor judgment. A few brave souls step forward. Priests, musicians, one man who looks like he's already regretting his breakfast. You pour diluted wine for each, murmuring a quick blessing more comedic than sacred. Then, at Apollo's signal, they drink deeply. An hour later, the courtyard hums with varying degrees of regret. One priest clings to a pillar, muttering apologies to forgotten gods. Another insists the ground is moving sideways. Apollo gives you a look that says, told you so. You grin and unstopper Philo's vial. Behold salvation. They drink, one by one. You wait, and slowly, astonishingly, they begin to recover. The priest straightens, the musician blinks at his hands, as if rediscovering fingers. Even the regretful one sits up, murmuring, I think I can see music. Apollo watches, half impressed, half annoyed. That shouldn't be possible. Maybe holiness and hedonism finally decided to share a table, you say. The sunlight around him dims slightly. Or maybe you've tampered with balance itself. What if the pain was divine currency? Remove it, and what happens to the meaning of joy? You think about it, the duality of celebration and consequence, of creation and decay. Maybe, you say quietly, the meaning doesn't disappear. It just matures. For once, he doesn't argue. Instead, he He looks toward the recovering mortals and sighs. You may have changed more than you realize. He's right, though neither of you admits it aloud. Something subtle hums through the air, a shift in the unseen contract between gods and humans. Pleasure and pain no longer sit in separate chairs. They've started to share the same cup. As you prepare to leave, Apollo calls after you. Be careful with your mercy, brother. Even good wine spoils if poured too freely. You nod. And even sunlight burns if you stare too long. For a moment, you catch a flash of respect in his eyes, warm, reluctant, genuine. You leave Delphi lighter, the vial now only half full. But in its swirl, you see something new reflected. Not just the promise of a cure, but the seed of a revolution. One that might ripple far beyond gods and temples, into the hands of mortals who'd turned divine hangovers into the science of healing. You smile. Sorry, Apollo, you whisper to the sky. I think I just invented the weekend. You leave Delphi with the satisfaction of someone who's just won an argument with a celestial know-it-all. The sun hangs smugly overhead, yet you feel lighter than it dares to shine. The wind carries a whiff of laurel, and maybe a hint of apology from Apollo, though it could just be your imagination being flattering again. Either way, you take it as divine approval to celebrate. Naturally, celebrate to you means throw a festival large enough to make history blush. The location is obvious. The lush plains of Nysa, your sacred ground of vines and music. You send out whispers through dream and rumor, an invitation to mortals and immortals alike. Come taste rebirth, it says. Come drink without regret. And because humanity has always loved the idea of a second chance, they come running. By the time dusk falls, the valley glows with torches and laughter. Garlands of ivy loop between trees like drunken halos. Satyrs tune their flutes, nymphs stir cauldrons of wine that shimmer violet under the moonlight. You stand at the heart of it all, wearing a crown of vines and a grin that could rival the moon's. Tonight, you declare, we drink and wake without pain. We feast and remember everything. The crowd roars. The first cups are raised, overflowing with dark sweetness. The air fills with the hum of lyres, the stamp of sandals, the smell of roasted figs and honey. You pour Philo's miraculous elixir into great bronze basins, blending it with wine in precise mortal to divine ratios. The satyrs cheer at your alchemy of mercy, and you can't help but feel proud, like a chef who's just invented kindness. As the night ripens, the effect begins to bloom. The mortals drink deeply, dance harder, and laugh longer. And unlike every festival before it, there's no collapse, no groaning choir of regret. Their faces stay bright, their eyes lucid. They can actually remember the jokes they're laughing at. It's exhilarating, terrifying, beautiful. One old farmer claps you on the shoulder, wine still dripping from his beard. My lord, you've done it. The world will never fear the morning again. You chuckle. Careful, mortal. The morning might overhear you and get ideas. He laughs, oblivious to how right you might be. But even perfection has its cracks. As the night stretches into the kind of dawn that feels like applause, you start noticing the side effects. A few dancers stumble, not from dizziness, but from euphoria overdose. Their bodies can't decide if they're sober or divine. One woman laughs until she cries, then laughs again because the crying feels good. A young poet sits cross-legged in the grass, scribbling frantic verses about clarity being the cruelest intoxication. You kneel beside him. You all right? He looks up, eyes bright as dawn. I can see every thought I've ever had. It's magnificent. It's unbearable. You nod slowly. Yeah, that sounds like clarity. The truth dawns sharper than the sunrise creeping over the hills. The elixir doesn't remove consequences, it reshapes them. The pain is gone, but the emotions remain unfiltered. They're too open, too awake. The human spirit was built to wobble between extremes. Now it's standing perfectly balanced, and it doesn't know what to do with itself. You realize that moderation isn't just about how much one drinks, it's about how much reality one can handle at once. Still, the festival continues. And in its strange harmony, something sacred happens. The mortals begin to pace themselves, not because they're afraid, but because they can finally listen to their bodies. They drink less, laugh more, and start sharing stories instead of wine. You find yourself oddly moved. For once, you're not a god of indulgence, but of equilibrium. As dawn fully blossoms, you stand on a small hill overlooking the crowd. They chant your name, not in desperation, but in gratitude. For a brief, shimmering moment, you see the shape of the future. Taverns without tragedy, celebration without ruin, joy that doesn't rot into regret. Then a satyr runs up, panting. "Bad news, boss." You raise an eyebrow. "You caught a goat singing opera again?" "Worse," he huffs. "The mortals can't handle the strong dose. The weaker ones are fainting. The priests are arguing about blasphemy, and someone set the figs on fire." You sigh. Every miracle needs a lesson, apparently. You descend into the chaos. Some mortals are asleep in bliss, others babbling prophecies about seeing through time. A few are simply too happy for the mortal nervous system to handle. You wave your hand, murmuring a soft, divine reset, and the excess fades like foam on wine. The crowd settles. The figs stop burning. When it's all quiet again, you stand before them, humbled but smiling. "So," you say, voice low and warm, "maybe we can't have infinite joy. Maybe a little regret keeps the world interesting." They nod, understanding, somehow wiser for the experiment. Historians still argue whether this festival of second chances ever truly happened, or if it was myth dressed in moral clothing. But the stories persist, of a night when wine forgave, and the morning greeted humanity like a friend instead of a judge. You decide to let the tale grow on its own. Myths are best when they ferment slowly. As the crowd drifts away, you sit under an olive tree, the elixir vial resting in your hand. Only a few drops remain, enough for legends, not mass production. The horizon blushes gold, and you can almost hear Apollo laughing somewhere in the light, whispering, "Told you so." You grin. Let him laugh. Even perfection needs practice. The birds start singing, and the world feels balanced again, hungover not from wine, but from wonder. You lean back, eyes half closed, watching dawn pour itself like diluted honey across the hills. Moderation, you murmur, the most intoxicating thing of all. The morning after the festival of second chances arrives, not with fanfare but with birdsong. Not the shrill, accusatory kind that mocks a hangover, but the gentle hum of a world slightly stunned by peace. The grass glistens with dew, the sky is that impossible shade of post-celebration blue, and you, Dionysus, patron saint of excess, find yourself oddly tranquil. You're still sitting beneath the same olive tree, its leaves trembling in the dawn breeze. Around you lie the remnants of the feast. Overturned cups, wilted wreaths, a few snoring satyrs tangled in vines. But something feels different. The air itself hums with balance. The scent of grapes lingers, sweet and forgiving. You pull out Philo's clay vial, your divine prototype, and watch the last few drops swirl like molten emeralds. It's beautiful, alive, faintly singing. A tune that doesn't belong to chaos or calm, but somewhere between. You realize you've stumbled onto something bigger than a hangover cure. Something alchemical, spiritual, maybe even cosmic. That's when you decide to name it. Tears of the Vine. You murmur the name aloud, and the breeze seems to approve. It fits. Melancholic, poetic, and just dramatic enough for a god of wine. Because truly, every grape is born from tension. Too much rain, and it drowns. Too much sun, and it burns. The perfect fruit lives on the knife's edge between excess and restraint. So maybe your cure is more than herbs and honey. Maybe it's that balance, the bittersweet essence of existence itself. You rise and wander through the quiet aftermath of the festival, stepping over sleeping revelers and broken amphorae. Each footfall releases faint whiffs of crushed grape and trampled thyme. You feel like a doctor making rounds in a hospital for happiness. You pause by one mortal woman sitting awake, her hair a mess of ivy, her eyes wide but calm. She's holding an empty cup, turning it slowly in her hands. Couldn't sleep, you ask. She smiles faintly. Didn't want to. I've never felt so awake. Her words ring true. The tears of the vine haven't just healed her hangover. They've opened something deeper, some quiet awareness that usually hides beneath noise. She looks at you curiously, like she suspects you're not just another traveler. What was in that drink, she whispers. You chuckle softly. Regret and forgiveness, in equal parts. She laughs, a bright human sound, and nods. Then I suppose that's the perfect recipe. You walk on, her laughter following you like incense smoke. You wonder how mortals will describe this moment in their songs. Probably with too much metaphor and not enough gratitude. But that's humanity's charm. By midday, the satyrs have awakened, grumbling that their dreams were too wholesome. We dreamed of moderation, boss, one complains. That's unnatural. You grin. Get used to it. The gods are evolving. Together, you trek to your vineyard on the hill, vines heavy with late summer fruit. You touch one cluster gently, and it hums beneath your fingertips. Inside those grapes, you sense the same resonance that filled Philo's potion, the pulse of harmony. You remember a saying once whispered by old priests. Wine is sunlight trapped in water, waiting for release. Perhaps your cure just completes the circle, letting the light flow back. Historians still argue whether ancient vintners understood fermentation as science or sorcery. You think it's both. When yeast devours sugar and turns it into spirit, isn't that just life reenacting its favorite trick, turning sweetness into memory? You pluck a grape, crush it between your fingers, and watch a droplet slide down your skin. It catches the sunlight, glimmering gold. The tears of the vine. And suddenly inspiration strikes. Not the wild, drunken kind that sends poets screaming to the sea, but something quieter, steadier. You can feel the rhythm of the cure in your bones, a sacred formula. Fermentation balanced by clarity, indulgence wrapped in reflection. You could distill it, refine it, share it not just as medicine, but as a ritual, a reminder that even gods need grace after excess. You spend days in the vineyard experimenting, blending mortal ingredients with divine resonance. Mint for clarity, honey for comfort, willow bark for the body's ache. And from the vines themselves, the sacred extract that holds the balance between joy and sorrow. The first time you brew it, the mixture glows faintly in the dusk, shimmering like starlight caught in syrup. You sip it carefully, expecting visions or thunderbolts. Instead, a deep calm spreads through you, a peace so pure it almost hurts. You realize it's not about erasing the hangover. It's about honoring the experience without punishment. Feeling everything, forgetting nothing. And that's when you understand the paradox. Your cure isn't meant to undo excess, but to reconcile it, to help mortals, and maybe even gods, live inside their contradictions. You decide to share it carefully. Not a miracle for all, but a gift for the mindful few who can appreciate what it means to feel fully and heal gently. When you return to the valley, the mortals are already singing about the night they drank with a god and woke with clear eyes. Their songs exaggerate, of course. In one version, you turned water into forgiveness. In another, you wept tears that became grapes. Myths ferment faster than wine. You let them. Truth tastes better when it's aged in story. As twilight settles, you pour a few drops of the tears of the vine into the soil. The ground hums softly, and new vines begin to sprout, faster, richer, alive with subtle light. You realize you've just created the first vineyard, blessed by both indulgence and restraint. You whisper, "Grow wisely." The wind carries your words, spreading them through the valley. Somewhere in the distance, a flute plays a slow, contented tune. You lean against an olive tree, smiling. For the first time in eternity, you feel something divine that isn't wild, loud, or chaotic. You feel balanced. The moon rises, pouring silver over the leaves. You lift a cup of your creation, watching the glow ripple across the surface. To second chances, you murmur, and to remembering the next morning. You drink deeply. It tastes like honesty, like learning, like life. Centuries drift by, as centuries tend to do for gods who no longer chase chaos. The world grows noisier, mortals trade amphorae for bottles, and vineyards march across continents like slow green armies. Yet everywhere you go, Italy, Gaul, the misty hills of Iberia, you find whispers of your old cure. They call it by many names: the healer's drought, the morning mercy, the sobering grace. Some even mistake it for an herbal tonic invented by monks. You don't correct them. Let the mortals think they discovered it. Humility is its own kind of intoxication. Still, you can't resist checking in on your creation from time to time. You wander through a 13th century monastery in Burgundy, disguised as a weary traveler. The monks are brewing wine in silence, their habits stained with grape juice, their prayers timed to the rhythm of fermentation. You watch as one of them stirs a pot of honey, mint, and crushed vine leaves. You recognize the scent immediately, your formula, resurrected through instinct or divine memory. "How did you learn this?" you ask the monk quietly. He smiles without looking up. "It came to Brother Etienne in a dream," he says. "He saw a god beneath a tree weeping into a chalice. When he awoke, he knew what to mix." You laugh softly. "Dreams are unreliable sources." "Perhaps," he replies, "but they're generous with their wisdom." You help them refine the process, adding a touch of willow bark, reducing the honey, letting the potion rest in moonlight. They don't suspect who you are, but they do notice the brew glows faintly when you stir it. "Must be the holy light," the young novice whispers. "Something like that," you say with a wink. As centuries pass, the tears of the vine evolve with humanity. In Renaissance Italy, it's sold as vino di risveglio, wine of awakening. In Victorian England, it becomes Bacchus's balm, bottled in elegant glass and sold to poets who mistake it for inspiration. In the jazz clubs of New Orleans, it's known simply as the remedy. Each version loses a little of the divine spark, watered down by time and commerce. But the essence remains, a quiet echo of balance. Then, one night in the 1920s, you find yourself sitting in a smoky Paris cafe, wearing a linen suit and pretending to read a newspaper. Across from you, a young writer with ink-stained fingers orders a strange drink. You catch a faint shimmer in his glass, the old resonance, your resonance. He takes a sip, sighs, and mutters, "For once, the morning won't hate me." You grin. The alchemy still works, but there's a melancholy tug in your chest. Mortals keep rediscovering your cure, yet they never seem to remember its real purpose. They use it to escape regret, not embrace it, to erase excess, not understand it. You start to wonder if even gods can teach balance to beings born of contradiction. By the time the 21st century arrives, you've become something of a myth yourself. A hazy archetype in history books, a brand logo on cheap Merlot bottles. Humanity still worships, but their temples now have neon signs and live music. Their rituals are digital, their hangovers chemical. You drift through festivals, clubs, vineyards, cities. Everywhere the same question lingers. Have they forgotten you, or merely replaced you? Then one night, deep in Napa Valley, you find a woman named Dr. Lyra Montes, chemist, vintner, dreamer. She's experimenting with molecular fermentation, trying to create a perfect restorative wine. You watch her work in secret, fascinated by her precision. On her lab table sits a vial glowing faintly green. She doesn't notice the light, but you do. It hums with the same song as your ancient prototype. You step out of the shadows. "Careful," you say softly. "That one's alive." She startles, dropping her pipette. "Who? How did you get in here?" You smile, adjusting your vintage hat. "Call me a consultant. I'm something of an expert in remedies for regret." Lyra narrows her eyes. "You mean hangovers?" "Among other things." She studies you, your slightly anachronistic clothes, your amused calm, and decides you're harmless. Or insane. Possibly both. You talk like an old myth. "Maybe I am one," you reply. Together you analyze her formula. She's unknowingly replicated nearly every element of your divine mixture, down to the honey and mint. Only one thing is missing, the resonance. That intangible harmony you once coaxed from the vines themselves. "You've built the body," you tell her. "Now it needs a soul." She laughs. "And where do I buy that? Amazon?" You grin. "No, you grow it." For months you guide her, showing her how to let the grapes ferment under moonlight, how to listen for the subtle hum in the barrels, how to balance bitterness and sweetness until the air itself vibrates. She thinks it's metaphorical. You know better. When the first batch is finally ready, she pours a glass and hands it to you. It glows faintly, alive again. You lift it in a silent toast. To old gods and new hearts. Lyra drinks, her eyes widen. "It's calm," she whispers. "It doesn't numb. It balances." You nod. "Exactly." The tears of the vine have returned, but this time they're in mortal hands. No temples, no miracles, no divine branding. Just a woman who understands that healing isn't about erasing the night before, but learning to live through it. You leave before dawn, slipping back into myth as easily as a shadow fades at sunrise. On her workbench, you leave a small olive leaf. When she finds it later, it's trembling with faint golden light. She smiles, though she can't say why. Years later, her winery's label will bear a simple inscription, dedicated to the balance between joy and memory. And somewhere beyond time, under the same olive tree where it all began, you'll raise your cup to her success. The vineyard hums quietly. The air smells of sunlight and patience. You take a sip, close your eyes, and finally, after ages of divine indulgence, feel utterly human. The centuries no longer roll, they drift, slow and warm, like late summer wind across a field of ripened grapes. You've become something between memory and myth, wandering unseen through vineyards, bars, festivals, and dimly lit kitchens where mortals laugh too loudly and promise never again. Each time someone clinks a glass and winces at the morning light, you're there, humming quietly under their breath, the whisper of mercy behind the ache. The modern world has new gods now, algorithms, caffeine, instant gratification, but the old hunger remains. Mortals still seek communion in a bottle, still chase clarity in the haze. Only now they call it wellness. Detox programs, juice cleanses, herbal elixirs promising to undo indulgence overnight. They've rebranded repentance into lifestyle marketing. You find it hilarious, in a melancholy sort of way. Still, there's beauty in their persistence. You pass through a rooftop party in Athens, LED lights flashing, laughter spilling like champagne. A young woman sits on the edge of the pool, swirling her drink with contemplative guilt. She mutters, "Why do we always hurt ourselves for joy?" You stop beside her unseen and murmur to the night air, "Because joy is the only wound worth keeping." She shivers, half hearing it, and laughs to herself. "Weird. Thought someone just said that." Then she takes another sip, slower this time. More deliberate. A tiny act of balance. You've learned to take your victories quietly. Once, you might have conjured vines from the concrete, filled the pool with ambrosia, summoned satyrs to play saxophones. But now, you prefer gentler miracles. A slower heartbeat, a softened hangover, a moment of clarity that doesn't require lightning. You drift on, crossing continents in seconds, drawn by the subtle music of human thirst. It's not the craving for alcohol that fascinates you. It's what hides beneath it. The yearning for connection. The brief illusion that the world makes sense when the glass is half full and the night is still young. Historians still argue whether Dionysus was a god of madness or of revelation. You've decided they're both right. Madness is merely revelation without a map. In Tokyo, you stand before a vending machine that sells sparkling plum wine. You can almost hear the hum of your old vines inside each can. A student buys one, bows politely to no one in particular, and mutters, "Kanpai." You bow back, invisible but pleased. In Buenos Aires, you watch tango dancers sway under streetlights, each step a reminder that discipline and indulgence are not enemies but lovers arguing in rhythm. The air smells of smoke and sugar. You feel an old pang, that ache between godhood and nostalgia. And then, unexpectedly, you find her again, Dr. Lyra Montes. Older now, hair silvered, eyes steady. She's standing before a crowd at a sustainability conference, speaking about the ethics of fermentation and the sacred relationship between consumption and consequence. Behind her, the logo of her winery glows softly, the same olive leaf you left behind years ago. You listen from the shadows. Our ancestors didn't drink just to escape, she says, voice calm and sure. They drank to remember that they were alive. The hangover wasn't punishment, it was proof. Proof that pleasure has weight, that joy leaves a trace. Applause, some polite, some heartfelt. You smile. She's found the words you never could. Later, when the crowd disperses, she stands alone on the terrace, looking out at the city lights. The night wind lifts her hair. "You're still here, aren't you?" she whispers. You step forward just enough for the air to shimmer faintly. "Always," you say. She doesn't turn around, she just smiles and raises her glass to the horizon. "Then maybe this time we'll learn to drink wisely." You nod. "Maybe this time." There's no need for grand finales. The world spins on, stubborn and bright. People will keep toasting, keep laughing, keep waking up with the dull reminder that joy has its price. You've made peace with that. The cure you invented was never meant to erase consequence. It was meant to teach gratitude for surviving it. As the city lights flicker like fireflies, you walk away for the last time, your bare feet whispering against the stones. The air grows softer, the edges of the world blurring like watercolor in the rain. You can feel your essence dissolving into myth again, into wine, into memory, into the quiet hum that fills every moment before laughter. You think of Philo, the sleepless alchemist, of Silenus snoring under olive trees, of Lyra's glowing glass and the satyr's endless revels. You think of all the mornings after, all the groans, the promises, the laughter that always follows anyway. The cycle is eternal, but so is the lesson. And you, Dionysus, god of balance, disguised as chaos, finally understand. The real hangover cure was never in the herbs, the honey, or the alchemy. It was in learning to forgive yourself for being human, again and again. You take one last breath of the mortal world. It smells of rain and warm bread and 1,000 small regrets that make life worth repeating. Then the voice softens. The night folds around you like silk. The vineyard fades, replaced by the simple rhythm of breath. Yours, the listeners, ours. Your footsteps slow until they're only memory, and even that begins to fade into the steady pulse of quiet. You can almost hear it now, the faint, contented hum of vines sleeping under moonlight. You exhale, long and easy. The story doesn't end. It drifts like the scent of crushed grapes on a warm breeze. Sleep now. You've earned it. Let the hangover wait for someone else. Let the night be soft and kind and endless.